Many, if not all of you taking this Nugget series are taking it because you want to pass the PMP exam. This particular Nugget is going to discuss how to prepare for the PMP exam. I'm sure you know this, but what is PMP? PMP is Project Management Professional. And it's granted by the Project Management Institute, PMI. PMI has taken a great effort to ensure that the people passing the PMP exam will be true project management professionals. They have specific requirements that you need to be working in the industry, in the field of project management, to even be allowed to take the exam. The exam is a very comprehensive exam to test your general knowledge and your application knowledge. It's both a general knowledge exam and an application knowledge exam to ensure that you do understand project management and you do understand how to put it into practice. There are very specific qualifications. There are different qualifications for the PMP depending on your educational background. If you have a university degree, the qualifications are different than without a degree, and we'll discuss at length what those qualifications are in just a minute in this series. You will need to understand the format for the exam itself. The exam has 200 questions in it. In order to pass the exam, at this point in time, you will need to get 135 of the questions right. And for those of you interested in the math, that means you must score 68.5% on the exam. The only grade given from the PMP exam is a pass or fail. So although you may have gotten 199, which is highly unlikely, but although you get 199 of the questions right, your grade, your PMP certification, does not receive distinction. You do not get your PMP with honors. A grade of 200 or a grade of 199 is no better than a grade of 135 or 136. But a grade of 134 is a failing grade, and you do not pass your PMP. 200 questions. Each of the questions are multiple choice. And it's a choice of 4 possible answers. You will need to go through and select the most appropriate answer. And the key is the most appropriate answer, not the correct answer, because there in fact may be more than one correct answer on the exam. Pick the most appropriate answer to the question, and again, the goal is to get 135 of them right. In order to do that, you need to know your material. It's intended to test knowledge, and it's intended to address application. You have 4.5 hours maximum to complete the exam, and the exam is computer driven. So those are the conditions you must be aware of. 200 questions, you must get 135 right, 68.5%. You need to select the most appropriate, as there may be more than one correct answer of the 4 possible choices. You have 4.5 hours in which to do it, and it will be a computer-driven exam. It will be administered on a computer system. Different companies administer the exam in different countries. You will need to go to PMI website to find out who will be delivering the exam in your location. But it is a computer-driven exam, 4.5 hours, and you need to be prepared. Before you will be granted permission to take the exam, you must apply and be accepted. You must meet the qualifications. The qualifications vary. If you have an undergraduate degree as a minimum, or if you don't have an undergraduate degree. If you have an undergraduate degree, you must have a minimum of 4,500 hours experience in the project management field. And that experience must have taken place within the last 6 years. Without a degree, the number is higher. Without a degree, you must have a minimum of 7,500 hours experience in the project management field, and that experience must have taken place within the last 8 years. What is experience? Does that mean you had to be a formal project manager, actively, directly managing a project for the 4,500 or the 7,500 hours? No, but it must be you have been involved in a project in some capacity where you have been involved in the project management area. So you may not have been the direct project manager, you may have been a team lead, or you may have been a team member who has some responsibility, some involvement in the project management processes itself. You will be required to list the dates and the times, i.e. the hours, of the experiences, and you must break your experiences down as to what element was in initiating, what was in planning, or how many hours was in initiating, how many hours were in planning, how many hours were in monitoring, in executing, and in closing. And these experience hours must be verifiable. The PMI certification board, the people who process your application, will check some applications and make phone calls to validate that the dates and times listed are appropriate, that in fact you do have the appropriate number of hours, whether you have a degree or not on a degree. So, fairly comprehensive, fairly extensive expectations on you having met the qualifications, fairly extensive expectations on ensuring that you have involvement in the project management field, that you in fact do have subject matter expertise, that you understand the application of project management before you will meet the qualifications to take the exam. The last component for qualification is you must have attended some formal project management education. In both instances, with or without the degree, you must have 35 hours of project management training. Training such as this Nugget series are applicable to this requirement. Any training that is PM related meets this requirement. If you don't meet these qualifications, you do not need to apply for the PMP exam because you will not be granted eligibility to take the exam. One last component of meeting the qualifications, you must agree to the PMI Code of Conduct. We have another nugget later in this series on project management professionalism, which will explain in more detail what the PMI Code of Conduct is all about. You want more information on the qualifications? Go to pmi.org. Click on the PMP, and there's a downloadable PDF file that will give you full details of what the expectations are, what the qualifications are for getting approval to write the PMP. And again, you must ensure you are meeting the appropriate qualifications. You must ensure your qualifications are verifiable, because they will be verified in some instances. And when you meet these qualifications and you submit the appropriate funds, there is a fee for taking the PMP exam. I'm not going to list the fee as the fee changes with time. Again, you can get the current fee structure from www.pmi.org. So you meet the qualifications, you agree to the Code of Conduct, and you provide the appropriate fee, and you will be granted permission to take the exam. In order to do well on the day of the exam, you need to understand the format. As we mentioned in the introduction, there are 200 multiple choice questions. There are 4 possible answers per. These tests have been professionally developed. These tests are computer generated, so avoid any of the tricks that you have heard of when you answer multiple choice questions. Always look for the longest answer. Always look for the answer that comes first. Most of the right answers are in the second position. The last answer, none of that is going to apply. These questions are professionally developed. There's been a conscious effort to try to keep the questions and answers of similar size. There's absolute attention to try to make the questions as straightforward as possible. There are occasional instances of where option D will be none of the above or all of the above, but in most instances you will have 4 separate possible answers to the multiple choice. Recognizing that the questions are designed to test your knowledge, general book-learned knowledge. Some of the questions are designed to test your application. When you are in an actual project management position, how would you deal with this situation? They're situational specific. And some of the questions are going to require you to do analysis. You're going to present it with some project management facts and figures. You need to be prepared for general knowledge questions, situational specific. If I was in this situation or when I was in this situation, how would I deal with it? And there will be questions where you need to go through and do analysis and think through and analyze the information provided in the question and use that to develop your answers. There will most likely be a series of questions, again, primarily analysis type questions, where you will be giving a scenario and then multiple questions directly related to that scenario, typically where the results of your first piece of analysis will be used to feed your second piece of analysis. The 200 questions are drawn from a large database of all possible questions. The intent is no two PMP exams ever given will be the same. It's not going to do any good to go out and ask your friend who just completed their PMP exam, what were the questions? Give me the questions so I can get the answers. It's highly unlikely that you will get many, if any, of the same questions on a second PMP exam administered. So be prepared for the style and format of the questions. The questions are professionally prepared. The questions are not meant to have a lot of distractors to try to fool you into picking the right answer. They are intended to test your knowledge, your application, and your analysis. And remember, you need to get 135 right of the 200 questions. You need to get approximately 70% passing grade, 68.5 if you want to be precise. Questions right. You need to be prepared, you need to understand the format, and you need to go in with the right mindset to ensure that you're going to pass this exam. The key to passing the exam, of course, is to know your material. You need to be aware that the exam is going to cover all the knowledge areas. In terms of breakdown for the exam is generally considered, and remember, every exam is unique, but the exam database is designed to give you this approximate percentage of coverage. So initiating will be approximately 10% of the total number of questions on the exam. Planning will be approximately 25%. Executing will be approximately 25%. And controlling will be approximately 25%. So if you need to focus your attention, you need to focus your attention where the majority of the questions are going to be, and that, of course, is in the core of the project management areas. Planning, executing, and controlling. Closing will be another 10%, and potentially a surprise if you're not familiar with the PMP process, there's 15 or approximately 15% of the questions related to professionalism. What is professionalism? Project Management Professional. It's a PMP. There will be questions on how well you can apply professionalism in the project management discipline. We talked about you will be required to sign off and agree to the PMI Code of Conduct as part of taking the PMP exam. You will actually be tested on that Code of Conduct in these questions related to professionalism. We have a nugget later in this series that deals specifically with professionalism. And for those of you doing the math, Yes, I know this does not add up to 100%. This adds up to a little over 100%, approximately 10%, approximately 25%, and so on, is how the coverage of the exam questions will be. Two areas I believe you need to be specifically aware of: earned value. There will be a number of questions on the exam specifically related to the application of, the calculation of, and the definition of earned value. If earned value is not a high level of comfort, a high level of knowledge area for you, and I suspect many of you taking this exam will not be very familiar with, and maybe not even have heard specifically about, earned value analysis, you need to prepare for earned value questions. And again, we have a nugget in this series specifically related to earned value. Another specific area that many of you may be unfamiliar with is specific network analysis questions. How do you calculate, how do you develop, how do you analyze a project network? We're probably all very familiar with tasks and task dependencies, predecessor-successor relationships. Network analysis goes beyond that. It accepts that, but it brings in effort. It talks about early starts and early finishes and slack. You need to be aware of the entire network analysis process, how to calculate it, how to analyze it. And again, we have a specific nugget later in the series dedicated to network analysis. To pass the exam, you need to know your material. It is going to test your knowledge of the material, your book learnedness. It's going to test your application, how do you apply? And a lot of the applications are going to be in project professionalism, but they will be also scattered through the entire area of the exam. Testing your application. If you were a project manager given this situation, how would you do? And finally, it's going to test your ability to analyze, analysis on the information provided. So you're ready for the exam. It's the day of the exam. What do you need to do? What do you need to do to be prepared? You need to bring your eligibility letter with you. You're not going to be admitted to the exam center without your eligibility letter. You need to bring 2 pieces of ID. At least one of those pieces of ID must be a picture ID to ensure that you are in fact the person who received the eligibility letter. The names on your IDs must match the name on the eligibility letter. And that's about it. You can bring a non-programmable calculator. You cannot bring any books. You cannot bring any papers. You cannot bring answers written on your arms. No, I'm just kidding on that. You cannot bring any other study aids. The test center will give you 2 pieces of paper. You can bring your own pencil and pen. And that's it. You are basically going into the exam center with nothing but the clothing on your back and your non-programmable calculator. The knowledge must be in your head. As the exam is relatively lengthy, up to 4.5 hours, I would strongly encourage you to bring some kind of snacks, some kind of water, so that you can take a break. But when you take a break, the clock doesn't stop. When you take a break for your snacks, to do a brain refresh, which I highly recommend, to have a drink of water, the 4.5 hour clock is still running. So be aware of that. And because you have no idea what the temperature is going to be in the exam center, I would absolutely suggest you dress in layers. If it's hot, you can take off a layer. If it's cold, you can keep the layers on. Be prepared, and I would say overall, you need to be relaxed. You've done your homework. You've done your study. You've taken this nugget series. You're an experienced project manager. I'm sure you'll do well. Be ready, be prepared, and be relaxed, and I'm sure you'll do your best. Final words of advice I have for you for the PMP are in the form of these tips and hints. First thing, when you sit down in the exam center, use the paper provided. If there's anything you're not aware of, if you're not sure you're going to remember the terms for earned value. Take your paper, take your pencil, write them out while it's still fresh in your mind. EV equals earned value. AC equals, BC equals, write out the terms, the pieces of information that you think you're likely to forget. Get them on paper while your brain is fresh, then you can go back and review them. As discussed throughout this nugget, memorization is not enough. If all you've done is memorize the PMBOK, you're probably not going to get a passing grade on the PMP. You need to understand the application. You need to be prepared to do the analysis. First thing, you need to build up your confidence. The exam allows you to skip questions. The exam allows you to mark questions to come back for later review. So if the first question or the fifth question is a hard question and you don't have an obvious answer, mark it for later review, skip it, and come back to it. Do a first pass through the exam, answer all of the easy questions first, build your confidence. Once you've been through and done all the easy questions, and there's going to be lots of them, there really is, there's going to be lots of easy questions where it's intuitively obvious, you know exactly what the right answer is, get them done. Then go back and look at the harder ones. And I think you'll surprise yourself. You're going to have probably pretty close to a passing grade on your first pass as you answer the easy questions. Now you've got your confidence. Now it's time to go back and start to answer the harder ones. As you're answering the questions, you need to put it into context. What would I do if I was in this position? And as you're putting it into context, you need to think PMI, PMBOK. The PMBOK guide would do it this way. That's what the right answer is going to be. I've heard people refer to it as PMI-isms. You need to think PMI. You need to put the questions into context. You need to put it into an applicational, situational, specific concept. Absolutely key. Look for the best answer. There's more than one correct answer. If there's one aspect of trickiness to catch you up in the PMP exam, it's the fact that some questions, not all, but some questions are going to have more than one correct answer. But there's going to be one answer that's absolutely better than the other. And that's, again, often where the PMI-isms come into play. Sometimes it's hard to find the best answer, so first eliminate all the wrong answers. Well, it's definitely not that, and it's definitely not that. So if you can eliminate 2 out of the 4 possible answers, it's a lot easier to look for the best answer when you've eliminated the number of options you have to deal with. You have to be prepared for calculations. You will be required to do some math. You don't need a PhD in mathematics, but you need to be prepared to do some calculations. You're going to be doing some calculations around earned value. You're going to be doing some calculations around network analysis with late starts and early finishes and so on. That's why you brought your non-programmable calculator with you. For those of you international people taking this Nugget series, you need to be aware that most questions are US-based. So if there's questions related to financial analysis, if there's questions specifically related to ethics, those questions are going to be based on how it would be interpreted, how would it be applied in the US. So that's something international people taking the exam need to be very aware of. Often, the correct answers are based on the general premises as proposed by PMI, proactive management. Do the right things right the first time. So as you're looking for the best answer, as you're looking for the PMI-isms, how this would be done by the PMBOK, often the correct, or maybe I should make that best answer, is based on the proactive approach. But the most important tip and hint I can give you is relax. You know your stuff. You've prepared. You've taken this Nugget series. You've reviewed and digested the PMBOK. You're an experienced project manager. You have thousands of hours of experience in project delivery. You're going to do fine. This nugget has been focused on the PMP exam and how to prepare for it. We've gone through the qualifications. You now know the specific qualifications based on whether you have a degree or don't have a degree. You now know how many hours of experience you need in the project management area. You know you need 35 hours of direct education related to project management. You know you need to accept the PMI Code of Conduct. Once you meet the qualifications, you're going to submit your application to PMI and you're going to be approved to take the exam. When it's time to take the exam, you need to understand the format. 200 questions, you need to get 68.5% to get a passing grade. Anything higher than 68.5 is passing. There are no honors, there are no distinctions. 69% grade is as good as 95% grade. No one is ever going to know your final grade. It's not a competition. It's truly a pass and fail. 200 questions, all multiple choice. All multiple choice have 4 possible answers. The key to passing the exam is to know your material. You need to have knowledge. You need to have application. And you need to have analysis. And with that in hand, by the time you complete this nugget series, you're going to be well prepared to pass the exam and to become a member of the growing number of PMPs internationally. Welcome, project management professional. This concludes our nugget on the PMP exam and how to prepare for it. I hope this video has been informative for you, and thank you very much for viewing.